Good morning. This is today's Bible reading. Transition Friday, before Pilate the governor. On the morning of the next day, Friday, Jesus faced the second of two trials, a hearing before Pontius Pilate. Pilate was procurator or governor of Judea from AD 26 through 36. As might be expected, the charges before Pilate changed from Jewish legal allegations to political allegations, especially that Jesus claimed to be king of the Jews. The Synoptic Gospels report that Jesus remained silent during the interrogation, responding only briefly and vaguely to Pilate's questions. John's Gospel, however, relates how Pilate engaged Jesus in reluctant conversation, with Jesus explaining that his kingdom is not of this world. The hearing before Pilate is augmented by three incidents. Judas' remorse at betraying Jesus resulted in an attempt to return the ransom money, and in Judas' suicide by hanging. Only Matthew includes this story, likely to show his Jewish readers a fulfillment of Old Testament prophecy. The Old Testament quotation in Matthew 27:9-10 is largely from Zechariah 11:12-13, but Matthew may have ascribed it to the better-known prophet Jeremiah because he refers to the buying of a field. A second incident is the warning about Jesus' innocence that Pilate received from his wife. Although Matthew's source for this information is unknown, it effectively heightens Pilate's guilt in the sentencing of Jesus. Only Luke's Gospel reports the third incident, an additional hearing of Jesus before Herod Antipas. That Pilate would refer Jesus to Antipas is understandable, since Roman rulers were customarily in Jerusalem during Jewish festivals, and since Jesus came from Galilee, over which Antipas had jurisdiction. Luke may have included this incident because it supported the prophecy of Psalm 1:2, wherein kings and rulers plotted against God's anointed. Pilate deserves no sympathy for his dilemma in sentencing Jesus. As governor, he was authorized with the plenary power by Rome, so his weakness and vacillation should not be mistaken for virtue. Josephus recounts Pilate's effective and indeed ruthless use of that power on a number of occasions. By choosing the path of least resistance in Jesus' case, Pilate was responsible for a monstrous evil, the release of a convicted assassin, and the condemning of the righteous Son of God to torture and death. Now the book of Matthew, chapter 27, 1-26. Jesus handed over to Pontius Pilate. When morning came, all the chief priests and elders of the people plotted against Jesus to put him to death. And when they had bound him, they led him away and delivered him to Pontius Pilate, the governor. Judas hangs himself. Then Judas, his betrayer, seeing that he had been condemned, was remorseful and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. And they said, What is that to us? You see to it. Then he threw down the pieces of silver in the temple and departed, and went and hanged himself. But the chief priests took the silver pieces and said, It is not lawful to put them into the treasury, because they are the price of blood. And they consulted together and bought with them the potter's field to bury strangers in. Therefore, the field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the value of him who was prized, whom they of the children of Israel prized, and gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord directed me. Jesus faces Pilate. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, saying, Are you the king of the Jews? Jesus said to him, It is as you say. And while he was being accused by the chief priests and elders, he answered nothing. Then Pilate said to him, Do you not hear how many things they testify against you? But he answered him not one word, so that the governor marveled greatly. Barabbas or Jesus? Now at the feast, the governor was accustomed to releasing to the multitude one prisoner whom they wished. And at that time they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. Therefore, when they had gathered together, Pilate said to them, Whom do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ? For he knew that they had handed him over because of envy. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent to him, saying, Have nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things today in a dream because of him. But the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitudes that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor answered and said to them, Which of the two do you want me to release to you? They said, Barabbas. Pilate said to them, What then shall I do with the Jesus who is called the Christ? They all said to him, Let him be crucified. Then the governor said, Why? What evil has he done? But they cried out all the more, saying, Let him be crucified. When Pilate saw that he could not prevail at all, but rather that a tumult was rising, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. You see to it. And all the people answered and said, His blood be on us and on our children. Then he released Barabbas to them, and when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. Now the book of Mark, chapter 15, 1 through 15. Trial before Pilate. Immediately in the morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council. And they bound Jesus, led him away, and delivered him to Pilate. Then Pilate asked him, Are you the king of the Jews? He answered and said to him, It is as you say. And the chief priest and the priests accused him of many things, but he answered nothing. Then Pilate asked him again, saying, Do you answer nothing? See how many things they testify against you. But Jesus still answered nothing, so that Pilate marveled. Taking the place of Barabbas. Now at the feast he was accustomed to releasing one prisoner to them. Whomever they requested, and there was one named Barabbas, who was chained with his fellow rebels. They had committed murder in the rebellion. Then the multitude, crying aloud, began to ask him to do just as he had always done for them. But Pilate answered them, saying, "Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" For he knew that the chief priest had handed him over because of envy. But the chief priest stirred up the crowd so that he should rather release Barabbas to them. Pilate answered and said to them again, "What then do you want me to do with him, whom you call the king of the Jews?" So they cried out again, "Crucify him!" Then Pilate said to them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they cried out all the more, "Crucify him!" So Pilate, wanting to gratify the crowd, released Barabbas to them, and he delivered to Jesus, after he had scourged him, to be crucified. Governor Pilate's unhappy constituents, Mark 15:7. In AD 26, Pontius Pilate replaced Valerius Gratus as governor of Judea. Pilate is mentioned not only in the Gospel accounts, but also by the Jewish writers Josephus and Philo, and by the Roman historian Tacitus. In addition, the name Pilate appears on coins and in an inscription found at Caesarea Maritima. As a governor, Pilate was responsible for the administration of the province of Judea, including judicial matters. Josephus states that Pilate had the power to execute. He was also responsible for collecting taxes and tribute, dispersing funds to the provinces, and sending revenues to Rome. Even so, the office of governor of Judea was not the most prestigious in the Roman Empire. A number of incidents occurred during Pilate's rule, AD 26 through 36, that resulted in skirmishes between the governor and the Jews. Pilate got off to a bad start when he introduced into Jerusalem images in honor of the reigning emperor Tiberius. These articles, religious offensive to the Jews, arose to such a protest that Pilate transported the items to Caesarea. In another incident, Pilate constructed an aqueduct with the use of Jewish funds, giving rise to rebellion that was put down with bloodshed. Josephus, however, reports that the Jews were upset not over the money involved, but over what was done with the water. Scholars have concluded that the unrest was due to the lack of concern by Pilate for the water's ritual purity as it came into Jerusalem. Tensions sometimes erupted into riots. Mark's Gospel reports the rebellion that apparently was well known in Jesus' time, though not unknown. The Gospel of Luke describes an encounter with the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices. Josephus and Philo also report events which may be connected to these Gospel references. Jesus' opponents made the most of these tensions between a Roman governor and his Jewish constituency, accusing Jesus of rebelling against Caesar. Now the book of Luke chapter 23, 1 through 25. Jesus brought before Pontius Pilate. Then the whole multitude of them arose and led him to Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, "We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ, our king." Then Pilate asked him, saying, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He answered him and said, "It is as you say." So Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowd, "I find no fault in this man." But they were the more fierce, saying, He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, beginning from Galilee to this place. Jesus faces Herod. When Pilate heard of Galilee, he asked if a man were a Galilean, and as soon as he knew that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. Now when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad, for he had desired for a long time to see him, because he had heard many things about him, and he hoped to see some miracle done by him. Then he questioned him with many words, but he answered him nothing. And the chief priests and scribes stood and vehemently accused him. Then Herod, with his men of war, treated him with contempt and mocked him, arrayed him in a gorgeous robe, and sent him back to Pilate. That very day, Pilate and Herod became friends with each other, for previously they had been at enmity with each other. Jesus sentenced to crucifixion. Then Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests, the rulers, and the people, said to them, "You've brought this man to me as one who misleads the people. And indeed, having examined him in your presence, I found no fault in this man concerning those things of which you accuse him. No, neither did Herod, for I sent you back to him. And indeed, nothing deserving of death has been done by him. I'll therefore chastise him and release him." For it was necessary for him to release one to them at the feast. And they all cried out at once, saying, "Away with this man, and release to us Barabbas, who had been thrown into prison for a certain rebellion made in the city, and for murder." Pilate, therefore, wishing to release Jesus again, called out to them, but they shouted, saying, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Then he said to them the third time, "Why? What evil has he done? I have found no reason for death in him. I'll therefore chastise him and let him go." But they were insistent, demanding with loud voices that he be crucified. And the voices of these men and of the chief priests prevailed. So Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they requested, and he released to them the one they requested, who for rebellion and murder had been thrown into prison, but he delivered Jesus to their will. Now the book of John, chapter 18, 28 through 40. In Pilate's court. And they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the praetorium, and it was early morning. But they themselves did not go into the praetorium, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Pilate then went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered and said to him, "If he were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him up to you." Then Pilate said to them, "You take him and judge him according to your law." Therefore the Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death," that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled which he spoke, signifying by what death he would die. Then Pilate entered the praetorium again, called Jesus, and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered him, "Are you speaking for yourself about this, or did others tell you this concerning me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight, so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here." Pilate therefore said to him, "Are you a king then?" Jesus answered, "You say rightly that I am a king. For this cause I was born, and for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is this truth?" And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, I find no fault in him at all. Release Barabbas. But you have a custom that I should release someone to you at the Passover. Do you therefore want me to release to you the king of the Jews? Then they all cried again, saying, Not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber. A kingdom of truth, John 18:36. The concept of kingdom in Jesus' time was rooted in the Old Testament. Kingdom most often referred to the reign or royal authority of a king. Jewish people prayed daily for the coming of God's reign. When they prayed for his kingdom, they did not doubt that God reigned over his creation in the present. Yet, they longed for the day when God would rule unchallenged and all peoples would acknowledge him. Most Jews associated this kingdom with the coming of a Jewish king who would lead his people to victory over their enemies. The Romans, however, guarded the title king. Anyone who, without the emperor's permission, claimed to be even a client king was committing the offense of high treason. Jewish leaders like the high priest Caiaphas and the Jerusalem aristocracy, who helped keep peace for the Romans, therefore wanted to stop any would-be kings who might stir up trouble with Rome. The governor, by contrast, understood Jesus' kingdom in very different terms. As a Roman, he knew reports of cynic philosophers who wandered around claiming to be kings while possessing nothing. Such philosophers lacked respect for rulers, yet were without political ambition for themselves. As thinkers, they spoke about truth and about reigning, but to a Roman pragmatist, they were at worst insane but harmless. Pilate, therefore, did not see Jesus as a threat, as did the Jewish religious leaders. Although Pilate asked Jesus, Are you a king then? He actually misapprehended the nature of the mission Jesus claimed to fulfill. Mocking the so-called king, John 19:2. Often playing games to pass time, soldiers were known to beat and ridicule those who they were about to execute. So they mocked Jesus, kneeling before him to imitate the Eastern Mediterranean custom of bowing before kings. Their salutation, Hail, was the standard way Romans saluted their emperor. Many Romans, and especially Greeks, disliked the Jews. Hence, as the soldiers mocked a condemned Jewish man as King of the Jews, they may have been mocking the land of Judea as a whole. Part of the soldiers' charade involved the placing upon Jesus the regalia of a king: crown, robe, and scepter. The reed parodies a scepter. The soldiers may have had a bamboo cane available, since they frequently used such for military floggings. Roman soldiers wore scarlet robes, so the robe they draped on Jesus was possibly a faded scarlet, if it was one of theirs. Possibly they imitated the purple robe of the Greek rulers who reigned in the Eastern Mediterranean before the Roman conquest. The soldiers mocked Jesus with words they thought were false, yet some of those words turned out, in the end, to be true. The Jewish people expected a king who would deliver them from the Romans, and the crowds hailed Jesus during his triumphal entry into Jerusalem. The Romans, who executed anyone they considered to be a threat to Judea's political stability, crucified Jesus on the charge of claiming to be King of the Jews. They failed to realize that Jesus' kingship was real, just not of this world. Transition sentenced to crucifixion. Jesus was delivered by Pilate to be scourged before execution. Commonly practiced before crucifixion, the scourge consisted of a leather whip with bone, rock, or metal in the ends that ripped the flesh from a prisoner's back. Scourging severely weakened a prisoner, thereby hastening death on the cross, or sometimes was fatal itself. In addition to the scourge, Jesus was subjected to the soldiers' mockery about him being King of the Jews. The scourging and mocking took place in the Praetorium. This area, which John identifies as the pavement, functioned as the Roman governor's headquarters. It was also often the governor's residence, and Mark describes it as a hall. Some think that the Praetorium was located at Herod the Great's palace in the western part of Jerusalem. One archaeologist identified the Praetorium with the square in front of the palace which Herod built in 23 BC. The accounts of Matthew and Mark report Jesus being crucified following the flagellation, but John's Gospel relates a continuation of the hearing. The effect of this long hearing before the governor reinforces Jesus' innocence. Pilate appealed for Jesus' release, but ceased such efforts when faced with a new political threat. The governor would not risk accusations of disloyalty to Caesar. In the end, the blame for Jesus' death falls on the religious leaders and the crowd, as well as Pilate. Amen. This is the end of the Bible reading today. Thanks for joining me. God bless you. Have a good day, and see you tomorrow again.